The 9 books of Sanchuniathon's Phoenician histories translated into English. Friedrich Wagenfeld, 1837. Preface. Last year, when I had published certain excerpts from the commentaries which Sanchuniathus composed in the native language of the Phoenicians, and Philo translated into Greek, all the most learned men endeavored, both publicly and privately, to prove that the text from which I had excerpted it was the true and genuine text of that ancient writer, to which chief work was contributed by Grotefend, a most illustrious man and especially an expert in these matters. For he interpreted with great subtlety those things which had escaped me in treating the more difficult passages, and those things which occur in this work, at first sight almost incredible, he explained with great clarity. Having brought forward witnesses from writers who are worthy of trust, so that they do not differ from the truth, and thus he again published a document of excellent insight and admirable doctrine. For this reason, I suspect that the reason he later dared to call the authenticity of the work into doubt, with the slightest effort of argument, was not so much because he was truly convinced that the book was a forgery, but rather to give me a kind of incentive to publish the work as quickly as possible, which was indeed unnecessary, since I was already busy publishing the work myself. If this edition seems to have been produced a little too long, you may attribute this to the paucity of Greek printers, which also, lest the Greek letters in the half-page part of the manuscript should be lacking in printing, imposed on me the necessity of adding a Latin version. Sanchuniathus himself therefore came forward, to be judged by the candid reader, whether he is a descendant of those most remote times, or a subject of later centuries. Indeed, what I have said in his defense in great detail, I will not repeat, lest I seem to have wasted oil and effort. However, do not judge such works by the discrepancy of the formulae from the usage of the ancient Greeks, but by the very genius of the writing and the general character of the whole work. Bremi, 1837. F. Wagenfeld. Philin's Preface. It is fitting for all men to know the deeds and wonderful deeds of their elders, so that they may furnish many examples to citizens of those who devote their lives to the use of the Republic, worthy of imitation, and may render modest those to whom the care of the Commonwealth is entrusted, by proofs, since kings, who, as the poet says, overturn wicked opinions, have always inflicted punishments. For which reason Adonilibnus, king of the Biblians, when he wished to know divine and human things and could find only a few experts in human things, but no one who could deliver divine things uncorrupted, ordered ancient writings to be brought, which he ordered the scribe Sanchuniatho to read and extract. While this was going on, Sanchuniathus, a man of great learning, having devoted himself to the study of many things, and ardently desiring to know the history of all nations from the first creation of the universe, applied great diligence to searching through the books of Tortoise. Because he understood well that of all who had seen the light of day, he was the first to invent letters, and was the author of written commentaries, and that it was from him that auspiciousness was derived, whom the Egyptians called Thoith, the Alexandrians Thoth, and the Greeks called Mercury. But for those who had recently approached the discussion of sacred things, having rejected the truth of what had been done from the very beginning, they established mysteries covered with dense darkness by means of certain allegories and fables invented, and by means of those things which follow from the nature of this universe, so that no one could easily perceive the truth of what had really been done. But he, when he had come across certain arcana volumes of the Ammonites, which had been brought out from the innermost recesses of the temples, where they had previously lain, and were not to be found everywhere, sought the opinion of all with diligent meditation, and having obtained a happy outcome of the work he had undertaken, having removed all the fables and allegories that were encountered in the very approach, he brought his intended work to maturity, until the priests who arose after him wished to conceal it again and to recall the commentaries of the ancient fables, whence that mystical feeling emerged which had never before occupied the minds of the Greeks. These things were discovered by us, when we were held by a strong desire to know the history of the Phoenicians, and after we had eagerly preserved a vast forest of books and monuments. Not that which was in the possession of the Greeks, because I perceived that it was concocted by some with great dissension of minds and contention rather than with a desire for truth. For the Greeks, as is well known, despise barbarians and speak with the greatest insolence about foreign affairs, especially those of the nations who live towards the east. But to give credence to those writings, especially because we see them with our own eyes, we are led by the dissension of the Greek inscriptions, about which we have diligently elaborated 3 volumes. The inscription of which is about an incredible history. For the Greeks tell of certain men whose names are not even known among the Phoenicians, nor of Agenor among the Sidonians, nor of Belantus among the Biblians, whom the poets say conquered Byblus. Situated by the sea, and flourishing Sidon. From this fact it appears that they have everywhere distorted the history of the Phoenicians, and that a great part of it is plainly invented, on account of the ancient enmities between the Greeks and Asia. But so that the Greeks too may be able to distinguish what is true and what is false, it has seemed to me to translate the narrative of Sanchuniathon into Greek speech. Now, in order that the understanding of the things which follow may be more enlightened and more distinct, we must also place this before all else, that the most ancient barbarians, especially the Phoenicians and the Egyptians, from whom other peoples afterwards adopted that custom, considered as the greatest gods all those who had found things necessary for the conduct of life, and who had conferred some benefit on the human race. They worshipped them with divine honors, because they believed that they were the authors of many good things, and, having transferred the use of temples which had already been built before to this function and office, they consecrated columns and rods in their names, and the Phoenicians, pursuing this with the greatest religious worship, also dedicated to them very celebrated feast days. In which indeed it was extraordinary that they assigned the names of their kings to the elements of this universe, and to some of those to whom they attributed divinity. Furthermore, they recognized the natural gods, the sun, the moon, and the other wandering stars, together with the other elements connected with them by the same affinity, as the only ones of all. So that mortals indeed had some gods, and immortals still others. Now let us begin to turn to Sanchuniathon.